just feel like we are at a really great moment in MS&E's history. When we think about the work that we do, we think about how that is likely to change the world.
Hello, I'm Jim Fabry, and I'm part of the communications team in the Department of Management Science and Engineering at Stanford University. Welcome to MS&E Stories and Voices, Faculty Profiles. It seems only fitting for our first faculty interview to feature a leader in the department. Pamela Hines is the Fortinet Founders Chair of MS&E and has been a faculty member since before the department was formed. Today, she joins us to share stories from her journey to Stanford, how being asked the tough questions led her to call academia home, and how her research and management informs her multiple leadership roles at Stanford. Pamela, thank you so much for joining us. So I want to start by talking about your journey to MS&E. You had a little bit of maybe a unique background because you worked at Pacific Bell for a while before going on to get your PhD. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience working in industry first, and then also kind of what made you want to get a PhD?
I worked for Pacific Bell for about 7 years. I was in the information systems organization, and when I left there, I was a technical director, so I was managing a group that were doing requirements definition. And it was great. I learned a ton, learned a lot about the way organizations work. But I looked at what a future would look like for me, and I just wasn't excited about the kinds of things. If I wanted to advance my career, there would be more budgets and politics and that kind of thing. And I really enjoyed the nitty-gritty of the work. So I thought that getting a PhD would enable me to still grow and advance in my career, but stay very close to the work itself.
Yeah, so was there any particular research question that you were interested in at the time, or did you kind of have to discover that as you started going back to school?
I mean, it's always a discovery process once you go back to school, even if you're really clear at the beginning. I didn't have enough of a background to know what would actually be interesting from a scholarly perspective. But one of the things I was very intrigued by was how often software development projects failed. Just millions and millions of dollars were spent on software development projects that ended up not getting used or integrated into the organization. That was a question that I anticipated being able to work on. And part of that kind of led me to human-computer interaction and technology and work. It's like, why is it the things that we build for people don't always work as intended? I think the piece that was really interesting to me is sort of putting in the human aspect of that in order to understand those dynamics.
I'm curious about that, like kind of the company perspective, the time and resources put into a project that might not get used. Were you looking at why a project might fail because it didn't connect with the humans who are the users of it, or also with the humans who are doing that development?
More the humans that were using it. So trying to understand why when, we would invest a lot of money in building a system and roll it out and then have people not use it. It's like, well, why is that happening? There's all this requirements definition, there's all this attempt to understand what it is we should be building, but then it doesn't work for the people who are expected to use it.
And yeah, so when you were in your PhD, or maybe just starting, did you always imagine that you were going into academia afterwards, or did you just see it as a general means of increasing the opportunities that you might have?
I never expected to go into academia. Yeah, no. And in fact, I didn't. So the first job I took after I graduated was in HP Labs. So what I envisioned as I was entering my PhD and doing it was being able to go into a research lab environment like HP Labs, Microsoft Labs, and so forth, Microsoft Research and so forth, and being able to make a contribution that way, kind of on, a lot of those organizations have these technical tracks so that you can still be very engaged in the work itself, but make a deeper contribution.
Super curious. So after you did work at HP Labs, and then at some point something must have changed. I'm curious how you came about making that switch?
Yeah, I think something changed without me realizing it. So while I was at HP Labs, I realized that I just love the academic environment. I love the intellectual challenge, the constant intellectual stimulation, and in particular, people being very critical of the work that I was doing and really asking me the tough questions and forcing me to think much more deeply about the work that I was doing. And I found in HP Labs, they were extremely supportive. There were a lot of resources. They loved what I did, but nobody ever said, that doesn't make sense. Did you think about it this way? Can you, they didn't ask the tough questions. So I felt like I just wasn't growing in the same way that I had been in the years that I was in my PhD program. So I came to Stanford, and I have felt challenged the entire time and have not looked back.
That's awesome. I think you might be the only person or the first person to ever say that sounds like you enjoy the revise and resubmit part.
Sometimes. Yeah, I enjoy the feedback more than I do those are slightly different experiences, but yeah. It can be constructive.
So that gets us to when you started at MS&E. So we'll transition a little bit into your experience while you've been here. You came to Stanford in 1998, which was just before MS&E was formed as a department. And I'm curious if you can speak to your experience of arriving at what I imagine was a time of kind of uncertainty and change.
Yeah, actually it wasn't. So I joined Industrial Engineering and Engineering Management, IEEM. And at that point, it was a small, cohesive, supportive environment, and it felt very, very stable. It was, a year or two later, we learned that externally, there was this belief that we really should merge EES-OR. So that created those changes.
What made you decide to join IEEM as opposed to some other department, either an engineering department or even a business school department?
Yeah, no, it's funny. I still remember the day that I visited MS&E and the people I talked to and the dinner that I had. And I just felt like it was home. The culture really resonated with me, the kinds of questions that people are asking, the kinds of concerns and impact that people wanted to have. And the way that I would articulate it now is I think that an engineering culture really aligns with what works for me and in terms of my values and my approach and so forth. Most of the other jobs that I was offered in academe that year were in business schools. And business schools tend to have a different culture, a different set of values. So it just fit really well. And then, of course, there was also the Center for Work Technology and Organization, which was just being developed. So it had been founded by Bob Sutton and Steve Barley. And I was one of the first hires into the center. And it was just exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to look at organizational issues and the intersection with technology. In business schools, there are IS or MIS groups, Management Information Systems groups, but the slant is a little more toward the technology than the people, and I was really much more interested in the people and the organizations. So this was literally the best place in the world for me to be.
Yeah, that's perfect. Fast forwarding a bit from there, you joined the WTO group and now have been a faculty director of it for a handful of years. Can you tell us a little bit about how the center has maybe evolved or changed, or what you like most about it now?
Yeah, it's funny. In some ways, I don't think it has changed very much. The mission of WTO is still very much about understanding that intersection between work, technology, and organizations. The technology has been changing rapidly. Like with AI, of course, there's a lot more work being done trying to understand how AI gets built, the impacts of AI in organizations, how it changes organization design, and a whole host. There are just so many questions to be asked around that. But that's very similar to, when we were studying email, the introduction of email or social media or technologies that were coming into organizations. Of course, the composition has changed. Steve Barley left a few years ago, and that, of course, was a huge loss since he was, in many ways, the person who envisioned what this is and was known for work in that space. But, we've brought in, new scholars that are asking new kinds of questions, and, it continues to thrive and evolve, but still with that very core mission.
You've also been the faculty director of the Stanford Engineering Global Programs. Can you tell us briefly what that is and how you came to be involved with the program?
What that is a set of programs that are intended to provide global experiences for students associated with the School of Engineering. And we've got two main programs right now. One is undergraduate visiting research program where we bring rising seniors from top universities in China to work with Stanford faculty over the summer. So it's a very small program, but has been around for the duration of our School of Engineering Global Programs. And the other one is an internship program. So we have internships in China, in Singapore, in Hong Kong. We've had some in the United Arab Emirates, Thailand, in India, and so forth. So these are internship opportunities during the summer for School of Engineering students so that they can actually have an opportunity for an overseas experience while they're here at Stanford if some of the other alternatives, like in the Bing Overseas Studies program, don't work for them. It's been really exciting, and I think it really broadens the horizon for these students. And, of course, the research that I do, some of it focuses on global work. And one of the things I love about the internship program is, probably the vast majority of our engineering students are going to be working globally. So having an internship that exposes them to a different culture and a different work environment hopefully will be really helpful.
Switching gears a little bit, you've been the chair of MS&E for a few years now, and I'm curious how your experience working in industry in the past has maybe shaped the way you approach leadership, if it has.
Don't know that it has. I guess in some sense, because I was a manager in industry, I'm familiar with HR practices and, some of the things that you normally wouldn't be as exposed to as a faculty member. So that's probably salary setting, that kind of stuff. So probably that has been helpful. But I think what's more helpful is the fact that I teach management. I teach organizational behavior. I'm, an organizational psychologist, which means that, I have a sense of how to motivate people and what's important in terms of, people feeling like they belong in the organization and just basic management and leadership practices.
As you look toward the future of MS&E, what most excites you?
I just feel like we are at a really great moment in MS&E's history. Departments always evolve. We are, of course, a very interdisciplinary department, and it's interesting to me to see how much we've changed, really, in terms of the kinds of research questions that we're asking and the kinds of impact that we're having from 25 years ago to today. And a lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of it is the new faculty that we're hiring. And they are just fabulous. They're excited about the research. They're asking really interesting questions in really interesting ways. And I just feel like they, whenever you hire a new faculty, they're bringing in their ideas and their research program, and it changes the department every time we bring in somebody new. And we've hired 5 new faculty over the last few years, so we're really seeing that kind of vibrant change taking place in the department, where they're not only determining the research direction, but also asking the tough questions about how we're doing things and how we're organized and all of that. So that's something that I'm very excited about. The other thing that I have observed in the department over the last probably 5 to 8 years, and perhaps even longer, is a fairly slow evolution to focusing a little bit more on social impact. And not that it wasn't there before, but it just seems to be more pronounced in people's research agendas and teaching agendas. And I think that's really exciting. And it doesn't mean that we only do not-for-profit social impact kind of work, but when we think about the work that we do, we think about how that is likely to change the world. And, in general, faculty want to make sure that what they're doing is changing the world in a positive way. And that also means that I think there's more field-based research than there was in the past, meaning that faculty are going out and trying their ideas out there. They're testing it on real kidney exchanges and real COVID allocation questions, so that we can really make sure that we're working on the right problems and the impact that we're having is the impact that we want to have.
What advice would you want to give to a future chair of MS&E or any other academic department?
So one of the things I did when I took over as department chair is I interviewed pretty much every member of the faculty. I think there were 2 that were unavailable, but talked to every faculty member and asked them what was important to them and what goals they had. I was so impressed with how thoughtful and caring and committed all the faculty were. And I've had the same experience with the staff. I think we just have an amazing group of faculty and an amazing group of staff. So I think the advice I would be is support people and get out of their way. People are doing really great stuff. And I think the role of chair is not to provide a lot of direction. I mean, vision's really important, but it's really about finding out what people need to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish, and then figuring out how to provide that. I think that's, for me, one of the most important roles that I play.
As we start to wrap up, I like to end by asking everyone this question: what is MS&E, or what is MS&E to you?
I see MS&E as an interdisciplinary engineering department where we bring together the social and behavioral side of things along with kind of the computational and engineering side in order to better understand and address large, complex social challenges. And, it ties back to the first question that you asked me, which was, about my early research. That really brought in, the people side of things and the technical side of things in order to understand this issue of investments in these software development systems just being wasted. So I think there are just so many large, complex, you could call them socio-technical kinds of problems in the world today, and I feel like we are extremely well positioned as a department to look at these problems from these multiple perspectives rather than just doing the engineering on the problem or just studying the impact or studying the the way that things are being made. So I feel like we have a really important role to play because of that.
Thank you for listening to this episode of MS&E Stories and Voices, Faculty Profiles. This episode was produced and edited by me, Jim Fabry, and Jackie Nguyen. Our music was composed and performed by Dale Nesbitt, adjunct lecturer in MS&E. Please be sure to subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whichever platform you're listening on, and check out our website at msne.stanford.edu. That's msande.stanford.edu. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.